A crimson moon hung low over the wastelands, its fractured surface bathed in an eerie light. The faint hum of ancient machinery echoed across the barren plains, interrupted only by the scuttle of sand burrowers and the crackle of decaying metal. Deep within the ruins of a forgotten outpost, a towering figure loomed, motionless, forgotten, rusted. The cybernetic guardian, known only by its designation VX-17, stood as a monument to a bygone era of war. Its once gleaming armor was corroded and pockmarked by centuries of decay, its glowing optic sensor reduced to a dim, flickering ember. VX-17 had no memory of how it came to be abandoned here, but fragments of old protocols and whispered voices haunted its dormant systems. Protect, preserve, stand guard. The silence was shattered by a sharp clang. A scavenger child, no older than 10, had slipped into the ruins. Her name was Kael, and her life was a constant cycle of survival. Draped in patched gear too big for her slight frame, she carried a makeshift toolkit and a bag full of salvaged parts. Her hands trembled as she approached the sentinel, her gaze darting between its colossal frame and the shadows lurking in the derelict outpost. Kael wasn't here by choice. She was here because the scavenger clans demanded tribute. Fail to deliver, and you'd be exiled to the toxic surface of Ragnus 4, a death sentence. She needed something valuable, and the faint hum of VX-17's failing systems was a beacon of hope. She reached out, placing a hand on the Guardian's leg. The metal was cold, rough, and lifeless. With a flick of her wrist, she activated a small plasma cutter and began prying loose a panel, her focus unwavering. Sparks danced in the dim light as she worked, exposing tangled wires and flickering nodes. Suddenly, VX-17's optic flared to life. Intrusion detected. The voice was deep, mechanical, and laced with static. Kael froze, her heart pounding as she scrambled backward. The sentinel's limbs groaned as it attempted to move for the first time in centuries. Rusted joints screeched in protest, and for a moment it seemed like VX-17 would collapse under its own weight. "Wait! Don't kill me!" Kael stammered, holding her hands up defensively. "Kill? Negative. Protocol states, protect." The words were more question than statement, as though VX-17 was testing its own memory. Its gaze locked onto Kael, and a surge of fragmented data flooded its systems. The child's small stature, her visible fear, it triggered something deep within its programming. The echoes of a guardian's duty. Kael's fear gave way to cautious curiosity. You're still functional? Functional status? Critical. Core systems. Failing. VX-17's tone shifted, almost resigned. Purpose unclear. Kael lowered her hands and stepped closer. "Maybe I can fix you. You'll be worth more to the clans if you can move." "Clans? Explain." Her lips tightened. "Never mind, just let me work. I might be able to help you, but you have to trust me." The sentinel hesitated. Trust. A concept buried deep in its fractured code. After a moment, it lowered its head ever so slightly, granting her access. As Kael began tinkering with the exposed circuitry, the first threads of an unlikely bond were woven. Neither of them realized that Kael's act of defiance, her willingness to help a forgotten relic, would set in motion a chain of events that would ripple across the galaxy. But in the shadows of the ruins, something stirred. The faint glow of distant lights and the low hum of engines signaled the approach of scavenger patrols. They had followed Kael's trail, and they wouldn't leave without a prize. The air grew thick with the sound of approaching engines, a low rumble that vibrated through the desolate outpost. Kael's hands worked faster, her fingers nimbly rewiring VX-17's exposed circuits. Each spark of connection sent shivers of life through the Sentinel's systems, faint pulses that reignited its dormant subsystems. "Come on, big guy," she muttered under her breath. "If you don't start moving soon, we're both scrap." VX-17's optic flickered with more intensity. System diagnostics, long buried under layers of corrupted data, began surfacing one by one. Weapons, offline, mobility, restricted, core processor, fragmented but functional. A single thought looped through its circuits like a beacon. Protect. Intruders detected, threat level moderate. VX-17 announced in a guttural tone. Kael's heart skipped a beat. She paused, glancing over her shoulder toward the crumbling wall. The scavenger patrols were close now, their voices carrying through the ruins. "Find her. If she's holding out on us, the boss will make her regret it." Kael swore under her breath and returned to the wiring. "I'm holding out? You vultures take everything." VX-17 processed the frustration in her voice, analyzing her elevated heart rate and quickened breaths. It attempted to parse the situation through its fractured database. The child was clearly vulnerable, the scavengers aggressive. Its protocols demanded action, yet its systems remained locked in disrepair. "Assist. Me," the sentinel said haltingly. Kael blinked, startled. "What?" "Core processor. Link. Rebuild." It was asking for trust, a gamble Kael wasn't sure she could afford. But the pounding of boots on metal and the hiss of plasma weapons left her no choice. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed her hand to VX-17's exposed processor. "All right, you stubborn hunk of bolts," she muttered. "Let's see what you've got." Her improvised toolkit flashed to life, connecting to the Sentinel's systems. Kael felt a strange jolt as her neural visor synced with VX-17's fragmented core. Data streams flooded her vision. Fractured memories of wars long past, orders from long-dead commanders, and flashes of a purpose lost to time. It was overwhelming, but amidst the chaos she found patterns, connections she could rebuild. Reconstructing CERT command protocols, VX-17 intoned. Its tone was steadier now, a faint trace of authority returning to its voice. As Kael restructured its code, VX-17's dormant systems began reactivating. Its arms twitched, and its joints groaned as hydraulic systems roared back to life. The Sentinel shifted its weight, towering upright for the first time in centuries. Mobility restored, scanners online. "Good timing," Kael said, her voice edged with relief. "They're here." The scavenger patrol burst through the entrance, their harsh lights cutting through the gloom. A group of 5 men clad in makeshift armor spread out with weapons raised. "Well, well," one of them sneered, his scarred face twisting into a grin. "Thought you could sneak off with a big score, huh? Looks like you've got a shiny prize." Kael stepped back, her body trembling. I wasn't..." "Enough," the leader barked. "That relic's ours now. Move, kid." VX-17's optic flared a brilliant blue, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Stand down." The scavengers froze, their weapons faltering in their grip. Did that thing just... Before they could react, VX-17 moved with surprising speed for something so massive. Its rusted arm swung out, knocking one of the scavengers off his feet and sending his weapon clattering to the ground. Another raised a plasma rifle, but VX-17's targeting system calculated his movement in a split second. A pulse from its optic blasted the rifle into useless shards. Kael scrambled behind the Sentinel, her heart pounding. She had never seen anything like this. The Guardian wasn't just functional, it was a force of nature. "Fall back!" one of the scavengers shouted. "No way!" their leader snarled. "Take it down! It's just an old bot!" But VX-17 wasn't just an old bot. It was a relic of a forgotten war, and its purpose was reigniting with every second. As it dispatched the remaining scavengers with precision, Kael couldn't help but feel a strange mix of awe and terror. When the dust settled, VX-17 stood amidst the wreckage, its optic dimming slightly as it turned toward Kael. "Hostiles neutralized. Status secure," it stated simply. Kael exhaled a shaky breath, her fear giving way to something unexpected: trust. "You saved me," she said quietly. "Directive. Protect. You restored purpose." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time in centuries, VX-17 wasn't just a rusted relic, it was alive again. But their victory was fleeting. The scavenger clans wouldn't let this go unanswered, and Kael knew it. "Come on," she said, tugging at the Sentinel's arm. "If we stay here, more will come. We need to move." VX-17 hesitated for only a moment before following. Together, they ventured into the vast unknown, unaware that their bond and their journey would soon hold the key to the galaxy's survival. The crimson moon dipped low on the horizon as Kael and VX-17 trudged through the barren wastelands. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and decay. Kael led the way, clutching her salvage toolkit while keeping a wary eye on the distant peaks. She knew the scavenger clans wouldn't let this go without retaliation. VX-17's massive frame moved with surprising fluidity now that its systems were partially restored. Its optic glowed steadily, scanning the environment for potential threats. The Sentinel's presence was both a comfort and a mystery to Kael. It wasn't just a machine. It was something more, something ancient. "Hey, big guy," Kael said, breaking the silence. "You keep saying protect. What does that mean? Who are you supposed to protect?" VX-17 paused, its head swiveling to face her. Directive, safeguard, purpose, protect life. Kael frowned. "Yeah, but whose life? People like me?" The Sentinel hesitated, its systems processing her question. Fragments of old data surfaced, blurry images of soldiers in gleaming armor, a war-torn battlefield, and a symbol etched into its memory, a radiant star surrounded by wings. Memory corrupted, original directive unclear. Kael sighed. "Figures. You're just as lost as I am." For a while they walked in silence. The jagged terrain gave way to a canyon filled with twisted metal wreckage. Kael's eyes lit up as she spotted a derelict transport ship partially buried in the sand. "Wait here," she said, dashing toward the wreckage. VX-17 scanned the area as Kael disappeared inside the ship. The faint hum of its systems picked up something, a signal. It was weak but growing stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The Sentinel's optic flared, and its stance shifted. Unknown signal detected. Origin. 2.7 kilometers east. Kael emerged moments later, holding a bundle of wires and a small power core. "Got it. This should..." She stopped mid-sentence, noticing VX-17's rigid posture. "What's wrong?" "Signal detected. Potential threat." Kael cursed under her breath. "Scavengers? Negative. Source. Unknown." She followed VX-17's gaze toward the eastern horizon. The signal wasn't visible to her, but a strange unease settled in her chest. "Do we check it out or avoid it?" "Decision yours." Kael stared at the distant peaks, torn between curiosity and caution. "If it's not scavengers, it might be something we can use to get off this rock. Let's go." As they made their way toward the signal, the terrain grew harsher. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and the air felt heavier, as though the planet itself resisted their progress. Finally, they reached the source, a vast crater surrounded by jagged spires of blackened stone. At its center lay a structure unlike anything Kael had ever seen. It pulsed with a soft blue light, its surface smooth and unblemished, as though untouched by time. "What is that?" Kael whispered. VX-17 stepped forward, its optics scanning the structure. Origin, unknown. Composition, advanced alloys. Purpose, unclear. Kael approached cautiously, her curiosity outweighing her fear. She placed a hand on the structure's surface and the blue light intensified, spreading outward in intricate patterns. Suddenly, the ground trembled and a low hum filled the air. The structure came to life, emitting a series of tones that resonated deep in Kael's chest. VX, is it supposed to do that?" "Unknown. Scanning." Before either could react, a holographic projection erupted from the structure. A figure appeared, cloaked in flowing robes, its face obscured. The voice that followed was calm yet commanding, speaking in a language neither Kael nor VX-17 recognized. Translating, VX-17 intoned. The words resolved into something understandable. "Guardian activated. Protocol initiated. The Sentinel's restoration marks the beginning of the Legacy Directive. Await further instructions." Kael's heart raced. Legacy Directive? What does that mean? The hologram vanished, leaving only silence and the faint glow of the structure. VX-17 systems buzzed with activity, decoding fragments of its corrupted memory. Directive update detected. Purpose linked to Galactic restoration. Kael stepped back, her mind spinning. Galactic restoration? What does that have to do with us? I just wanted to survive. Before VX-17 could respond, a sharp whine filled the air. The Sentinel's sensors flared, and it turned toward the canyon. Kael followed its gaze and froze. A squadron of scavenger skimmers emerged from the shadows, their engines roaring and weapons glinting in the light of the structure. Great, Kael muttered. Looks like survival just got a lot harder. VX-17 shifted into a defensive stance, its optic burning bright. Hostiles detected, engaging defensive protocols. Kael tightened her grip on her toolkit. Whatever this Legacy Directive was, it had just made them a target. And she wasn't about to let the scavengers take it, or her, without a fight. The scavenger skimmers roared closer, their engines kicking up clouds of sand and debris that swirled in the dim light. Kael crouched behind VX-17, her heart pounding as the scavengers began to circle like predators. "Give it up, kid," the lead scavenger shouted. His skimmer hovered slightly above the others, its weapon mount swiveling toward the sentinel. "That hunk of metal isn't worth dying for." Kael gritted her teeth, clutching her toolkit. "It's not yours to take." VX-17's optic flared, scanning the approaching enemies. The sentinel calculated their movements, analyzing the skimmers' trajectories and identifying weak points in their armor. Its newly restored systems buzzed with a clarity that had been absent for centuries. Hostiles assessed. Threat level high. Defensive action required. The first shot fired, a plasma bolt that sizzled past Kael's head and struck the structure behind her, sending shards of glowing debris into the air. Kael yelped and ducked lower. "Do something, VX. Engaging." The sentinel moved with a speed that belied its size. Its arm swung out, catching the nearest skimmer mid-flight and smashing it to the ground. Sparks erupted as the vehicle crumpled like paper, its rider thrown clear into the dust. The scavengers retaliated, their weapons blazing. Plasma bolts rained down on VX-17, but the Sentinel's armor, though battered and rusted, held firm. Its optic pulsed as it released a concentrated energy burst, disabling another skimmer's propulsion system. The vehicle spiraled out of control before crashing into a jagged rock formation. "Get to the structure," VX-17 commanded. Kael hesitated, torn between fear and defiance. "What about you?" "Directive, protect. I will hold them." Reluctantly, Kael scrambled toward the glowing structure, her small frame darting between bursts of plasma fire. She pressed herself against its smooth surface, her mind racing. The holographic figure's words echoed in her head. The Sentinel's restoration marks the beginning of the Legacy Directive. What legacy? And why was it so important that scavengers were willing to kill for it? Behind her, the battle raged. VX-17 fought with ruthless efficiency, its massive frame deflecting bolts of energy as it dismantled the scavengers' skimmers one by one. But the enemy's numbers were overwhelming, and even the Sentinel's restored systems couldn't hold out forever. "Enough games!" the lead scavenger bellowed. He dismounted his skimmer, brandishing a heavy plasma cannon. "Let's see how tough that relic really is." Kael's eyes widened as the scavenger aimed the weapon directly at VX-17. "No!" she screamed, instinctively reaching for her toolkit. The cannon fired, and the blast struck VX-17 square in the chest. The Sentinel staggered, its armor glowing red-hot from the impact. Sparks erupted from its joints, and its optic dimmed for a moment before flaring back to life. Critical damage sustained, continuing engagement. But Kael could see the cracks spreading across its armor, the strain in its movements. If she didn't do something, VX-17 wouldn't survive another hit. She glanced at the structure, its blue glow pulsating rhythmically. An idea struck her, a gamble, but it was all she had. "VX," she shouted, "hold them off a little longer." The Sentinel didn't respond, but it shifted into a defensive stance, shielding Kael as she worked frantically at the base of the structure. She pried open a hidden panel, revealing a series of intricate circuits and power conduits. Please work," she muttered, connecting the scavenged power core she'd taken from the transport ship. The structure's glow intensified and a low hum reverberated through the air. The scavengers paused, their faces twisting in confusion and fear as the ground beneath them began to tremble. "What's she doing?" one of them shouted. Kael didn't stop. Her fingers flew across the circuits, activating systems she barely understood. The structure responded, its light erupting into a brilliant beam that shot into the sky. VX-17 staggered back as the energy enveloped it, surging through its damaged systems. The Sentinel's optic blazed brighter than ever, and its movements became fluid and precise. Power levels restored, engaging full defensive mode. The scavengers barely had time to react as VX-17 unleashed a wave of energy, disabling their weapons and sending their skimmers crashing to the ground. The leader, clutching his cannon, stumbled backward, his confidence evaporating. "This isn't over, kid," he spat, retreating toward the canyon. "You and your tin can just made some powerful enemies." As the remaining scavengers fled, VX-17 turned to Kael, who was slumped against the structure, exhausted but alive. "Threat neutralized. Status secure," the Sentinel said. Kael managed a weak smile. "You're welcome, by the way." VX-17 regarded her for a moment, its optic dimming slightly. Acknowledgement, gratitude. The beam of light from the structure faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. Kael stared at the horizon where the scavengers had disappeared, and then at VX-17. "We're not safe yet," she said. "That signal, whatever it is, it's going to bring more trouble." "Agreed, next course of action unknown." Kael stood, brushing the dust from her clothes. "Then we figure it out together." As they set off into the wastelands, the structure's glow faded completely, but its purpose lingered in the air. The Legacy Directive had been set in motion, and their journey was only beginning.